Hi, everyone. Welcome to Back to the Basics series webinar, part 7 of 9. Almost done. We're going to do invoices today and completing orders, a few tips and tricks or best practices along the way. If you've just joined us, just please make sure you mute yourself. And then we'll do questions at the end like usual. Sounds like everybody's really enjoying these and looking forward to the webinar, so I'm getting lots of good feedback. Please keep it coming. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, we are doing invoicing today. So, customer invoicing. Again, one of the best practices that we try to encourage is using those action items. So you should have an action to perform for even a customer invoice. Get the action item, you open it up, takes you straight to this window. Okay. You need to know how to get to there manually. You should always know how. Modules, customer invoices. While I'm on this topic though, keep in mind as we go through this invoicing module, something to always keep in mind is that it's directly connected to order entry screen. So if you were in the order entry session, I kind of talked about how I kind of like to call this screen the invoicing, customer invoicing screen as well, because everything that's here is just going to be pushing over to your customer invoice screen. So with that being said, if there's something that you're needing to adjust, the build to is not correct, the install location is incorrect, or there's tax on it when there shouldn't be, it's all pulling from the order entry screen, which is, also pulling from the quote. So everything's feeding through. You start it with your quote, it gets pushed to an order. That's what carries through to the customer invoicing screen. So real important, we're processing the quotes correctly. And if you need to make adjustments, you would want to go back and adjust those. Change management, we'll talk a little bit about towards the end. But before I jump into actually invoicing, one of the questions I get quite often is deposit invoices. If you are doing deposit invoices inside of this screen, you're recognizing that revenue, which is fine if that's the way that you handle your accounting. But we, just so everyone's clear, where eManage likes to handle the customer deposit invoices, that is in the quote screen now. Has been for some time, but we're basically creating a way for your salespeople or whoever's creating your quotes to go in and process that deposit invoice without getting accounting involved. You basically usually just need to create something to submit to the accounting department just to get a check cut. And typically you don't want to, most of my customers are not recognizing that revenue. So what you would do is come into this quote screen, into the bill of materials, into your view quotes tab, double click on your quotes. And then you're going to get your quote settings screen pop up. And that's where you're going to handle your customer deposit invoices so that it doesn't hit the books. It's just a pro forma invoice. So instead of going in, the old way that I know of is going into Quickbooks, creating a dummy invoice, if you will, and then we deleted it out. So eManage is, creating a way where you can get around that and not have to bog down the accounting department. So definitely share that with your salespeople. So basically what you do is these terms of sale have to be set to some type of deposit set of terms, whatever deposit set of terms you have in here. You might have multiple, because what you do want to see is something in here. You can't just modify this. This is all being pulled from the administrator. It's in your setup. You should have basically a payment schedule for these terms of sale. If you don't see anything down here or right here, definitely contact us so that we can make sure that your terms of sale are set up correctly within a payment schedule assigned. But once you set up those terms of sale, then you can go down here and choose deposit invoice type. Okay. Mostly everyone should probably just be going with option/phase, but you do have a couple of options. But this is a standard option here. Real nice, clean look to the deposit invoice that matches your summary type, what you're typically choosing on your summary type, broken down by phase, which is usually your room or your floors, your phases. And then you can hit that print icon to print the deposit invoice alone. Or if you went down to save and print, it would print the quote with the deposit invoice. So there's your deposit invoice there. That way you can get something over to your client, email it over straight from here, save to eManage, send that out. Then there's record, send it out from eManage so that there's record of it being sent to the client. Every deposit invoice that you create until the deposit's been applied, you're going to also have under today pending deposit invoices so that your accounting department can keep track of what money we've requested to be coming in. Okay, so that's where deposit invoices should be handled. If you are recognizing that revenue, obviously you can create an actual deposit invoice in this screen as well. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But as you can see up top, just like in a lot of different places in the system, you got your preview up here. So these are all your orders. So if you had multiple orders, you'd see them all listed out up here. And when you highlight that order, you're going to see selected order details here. Okay. Right next to that, you're going to see project sale information. So just some summaries. But this one is when you highlight, and this is your total. So if you had multiple orders, this right side is going to show you your total summaries. So right here it says selected invoice and right click to apply payments. That's when we're going to apply payments. But over to the right, you're going to see your options here. Modify deposit, add deposit, print selected new invoice. So we're going to go with new invoice and then we'll talk about these buttons in a little bit. So it's pretty straightforward. Again, it's just pulling from the order entry screen. So everything that's been populated into that order entry screen is just pushing over to the customer invoicing module. So if you see something that's not right here, bill to, tax, you got to go back and fix it. So this one's pretty, if you have all your setup correct in the admin and in your chart of accounts all set up correctly, you should see all that breaking out automatically. So you can see here, I've had a bill in here. This one's going to look kind of odd because you wouldn't typically see same as the sales here. I didn't mark up this, but I had a bill posted to WIP, so it's converting that WIP to COGS for both my furniture and my freight based off of my setup here. Automatically breaking that out, the tax, the furniture, the labor. So you shouldn't have to manually be applying anything to accounts. Although you can, you shouldn't have to. So here, if it's just a simple, straightforward invoice, you would just hit your billing type, final. You should not be doing anything up here. It says use job number because it's telling the system to use the job number. You shouldn't have to renumber your invoices unless it's been required by your customers or something. You should just let the system auto assign numbers as it does in the rest of the system. So it's just telling the system, if you have it set up that way on the back side to just use the job number, it's just going to punch it out with 5592-1, 5592-2, so on and so forth, if you have multiple invoices. So I choose my billing type final, and that's really all I would have to do unless you need to change your billing dates and due dates. Based off of the terms of sale that I have set up on this client, it should automatically put my due date out based off of those terms. If you're constantly changing this due date, reach out to me. I'll let you know how to fix that. Although you can override it if you need to. So if I change this, it's going to change it automatically here too. But if I needed to override it, I can. Otherwise, all you would really need to do is choose your billing type. Make sure that you don't have anything left to post. It's a big red flag right here. If you see something in this amount to post, something's not right. Something wasn't applied correctly in the bill of materials that carried over to order entry. So anytime you see that, and if you don't know how to identify where that problem might be coming from, just feel free to call into support and we can help you identify where that problem is. You should always see that balancing out. So my amount due matches my amount mapped out to my account. You can adjust. If I needed to highlight and delete, I can, and then map that 190 out to something else here. So I can modify if I need to. Otherwise, it's just a save and print. This trigger here, would you like to make 1/22/2020 the final invoice date on this order? Typically, you should always be selecting yes here if it is a final invoice. If you're doing progress billing or a deposit invoice, you would select no here. This is just triggering those final invoice dates. So it's that column. In a lot of reports, It's an order entry screen, but that's what's triggering your final invoice date just for reporting purposes and things like that. So you should be selecting yes if it's a final invoice. No, if it's not. First thing you should always be doing, if you don't have an alternative, it should just go straight to it. If you have alternatives, you can select your alternative there. Just going to use the original here. First thing you should always be doing, obviously, give it a look over, make sure everything looks fine. Your build to install, if you're checking those things, definitely give it a once over. Otherwise, the very first thing you should always be doing is save to eManage 1. That's the best practice there. Some of you are seeing these numbers generate on the purchase orders and the invoices. We are looking into that. We've thought that we're working on naming all of your documents automatically, but we connected it to the wrong ID field. So it should say 5592-1, and that will be out in the next update more than likely. So I would change this 23044, probably the invoice ID, which really is an internal number for us. That really probably means nothing to you guys. So right now you do need to be changing that 5592-1. Should have a document type of customer invoice and save. From here, I can print if I need to, email straight from here. So that's why those action items can be really helpful. If this invoice needed to be sent specifically to a certain email address or something like that, you know, those kinds of notes can be in that action item. So when your accounting department is opening it up, their action item, they know exactly who they should be emailing it to. Unless you have those standard email addresses for certain accounts, definitely get those in the system. What I highly suggest, just like our purchase orders. So if you were in that session, we talked about putting those order entry emails into the system in a very specific format. I suggest doing the same with customer invoices. So if this was always to go to accounts payable at bankoftexas.com, I would just right click, actions, add a quick contact on the Bank of Texas account, and get it in the system. That way you don't have to continue to look for it, type it all out. But I would go with the same format. Customer name first. With purchase orders, it was vendor name first. Last name, purchase orders was order entry. This one I would do like maybe AP or something like that. Whatever you do, just try to keep it as consistent as possible. Consistency is definitely very helpful. And then I would come down here and say, you know, AP at bot.com. So now when I go to email, of course, put that in there. I tend to copy this and paste it right in my subject. Anywhere I can copy and paste, save a little extra time, I'm definitely going to do so. Paste that first. Now I can just start typing Bank of Texas, and boom, it's there. If you're not using templates, this is a great area to be using templates. Accounting, invoices, purchase orders, great place to use templates. So that is under tools, configure email templates. If you're typing the same thing over and over, dear, blah, 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 please see attached, see so-and-so for questions, fill those into templates, and you can just highlight that template, use selected template, punches in that text for you automatically. If you needed to add additional documents, sometimes your customer might require you to send a purchase order, their purchase order. Ideally, you should have those saved in your documents already. So you could go history documents, keep your email open, drag it over to the other screen if you need to. Say this is the customer PO. Just highlight first, grab it, drag and drop. You can also attach documents from your computer, your local PC. But you know, ideally those documents should be in your history be in the document history. going to automatically connect this to the project because I emailed out of this type of view. Anytime you do that, it's going to connect it straight back to the project. And you can choose different signatures or different accounts to send from if you need to. So if you had multiple accounts, a lot of times accounting might have a separate accounting type email. You need to drop this down. If you have it set up in Outlook, it'll just automatically recognize that you have multiple accounts, and you should be able to just select that account that you're sending from and send. Okay, a couple different things here. That was a, simple situation. There's going to be some different scenarios that you want to know how to handle. Change management is kind of difficult. It just really depends on how you want it to show in the system. If there was not supposed to be tax on this, I would kick it back and have whoever created this quote remove the tax and send it through to be reprocessed. But you can go into order entry and you can just move this phase. I can just come in here and just modify the tax. I need to. If the bill to were to be different, search, grab who the bill to should be, drag and drop. That's how you would change the bill to for the invoice. That does mean that whoever created the quote, created it incorrectly. So you would probably want to let somebody know that they fixed it for anything going forward. But going back and changing anything for the invoice, again, directly connected to the order entry screen, which is connected to the bill of materials. So how you want to handle that would be up to you guys internally. Adding deposits. So if we sent that deposit out to the client from the quote screen, and now I'm just recording the deposit, I don't need to do new invoice and add the payment to it. You can just hit add deposit. And what this does is it's going to push over to QuickBooks as a deposit invoice with the payment applied to it. So it's kind of knocking out two birds with one stone. If you had a set of terms of sale already set to a 50% or 30%, whatever your terms of sale were, this would automatically fill in. Otherwise, you can modify it. And you can always come down here. Maybe they gave it to you for $25.40 even. You can always modify these amounts. Receipt date, how it was paid, reference number, check number, project number, if there's no check number, something like that. And then choose your account and save. If you make a mistake on adding the deposit, maybe you added it to the wrong order, wrong project, something of the sort, what you would do is hit modify deposit and just zero out the amount and save. There's nothing else that you have to adjust but the amount if you're trying to clear a deposit. You can only add one deposit to an order. So if you received a payment after the initial deposit, we would consider that a payment. We are looking into enhancing some of these features, like modify deposit. There should just be a delete deposit button if we needed to delete it. Or we are looking into multiple deposits if you needed to. But right now, the way that you would handle that is just new invoice. And you can adjust the percentage of that invoice. So this would be more like a progress billing. So what you can do is come up here, adjust the percentage. And what it does is it adjusts all the GL accounts as well, the amounts on those accounts automatically. From here, you can modify amounts. And like I said, you can highlight and delete things. You just want to be really careful with that because then the next one that you come in to try to create, the numbers might be a little bit funky. So you want to try to let the system do what it's supposed to do automatically. And if you are constantly modifying, let us know so we can try to get you a better way of doing those things. Maybe it's something we need to fix on our end, but you really want to try to let the system do what it's supposed to do based off of all the setup that you have on the backside. Got a question came in. How do you send a deposit to QuickBooks without an invoice? When you add a deposit, it automatically knows to send it over as a deposit invoice with the deposit applied to that deposit invoice. So it's just something that the system knows to do. But that's standard for, I'm going to get this wrong, but I believe it's accrual accounting. I could get that, I could have that totally wrong, but for people who are not wanting to recognize that revenue just yet, typically you want to recognize the revenue at the same time of all the costs, which would be when you're creating a final invoice. Hopefully that answered your question, Keith. A couple of other little things, I think. Let's see, add deposit. Oh, payments. So let me just get this invoice back in there real quick, and then I'll show you how to apply a payment. So all I'm doing is putting it as final, save and close. Yes. So let's say we sent this invoice out to the client. Project has just completed, so they sent final payment. Just like it says here, select an invoice and right-click to apply payment. That's all you do. So right-click, apply payment. And if it's a different amount, you can change the amount. Otherwise, it's going to put in the full amount for you. Check, put your check number in, and save. If you need to adjust the date, you can. You want to see where these payments are after you've added. A lot of people miss this right here. This little plus sign, that's going to show you the payments underneath, who actually added it, and all of that good stuff. Okay, credits do not push over to QuickBooks as of right now. So if you needed to apply credit, let's say a client emails you back and they're like, this chair never delivered, or we're totally unhappy, whatever the reason might be, you can apply a credit in eManage, but you will also have to add a credit memo and apply that credit memo in QuickBooks. That is also something we're looking into adjusting. Questions so far? All right, I'm going to keep moving. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them in. All right, so let's say now the payment has come in full. Typically, as a best practice, we typically say that you shouldn't complete your orders until the payment has been received in full. Now, that's not always going to apply. You know, maybe you have some costs still coming in, but typically, by the time you receive full customer payment, that's been adequate enough time to receive all costs as well, because you really don't want to complete an order until it's been completely closed out. So no receivables, no costs left to add onto the project or onto the order. So you can always go back and take a look at your acknowledgements costing to make sure all invoices are applied. But you also have, did I show that? In the bottom of the invoice, you do have an unbilled cost. I'm sorry, in the middle. So right here, you can see this one had no unbilled cost. I've applied all costs to any acknowledgements and purchase orders that have been applied on this order. So that's at a quick glance, you can see that. So just by double clicking, you should be able to see that there in this screen here. But once it is absolutely 100% completed out, that's when we would typically say, okay, now you would come up here, mark this little completed checkbox. And this is what triggers a report that I really like. Under reports, come on. Sorry about that. It's freezing up on me. Try that again. Reports, profit report, orders completed. It's second from the bottom. don't know if it's going to let me select it or not. It's acting up a little funny. But that is a profit report based off of completion date. So that would basically mean if you are taking this route of completing your orders when the final payment is applied, then that's your basically your date range is your payment date. And again, that's just going to give you usually enough time to get all of your costs and receivables in. So when you click on profit report orders completed, it's going to give you a full list of all the projects broken down by salesperson, giving you a profit report, so your margins, your GPs, and it is broken down by salesperson, and then you get a total summary at the end as well. So it's for overall job profitability on multiple jobs. So it's a really great report. If you want to see broken down, per job, one specific job, my computer's freezing up a little bit. Under modules, you'll see final profit always in each individual project. And that's going to show you, all your costs, all your receivables, any time applied to the job by installers or otherwise. Now, not everybody's going to have access to this if you didn't grant access. It is a right thing. I personally like to give access to everyone. I don't think that final profit should be something hidden, especially as a salesperson. It's their job. They should be able to see how they're doing on it. Now, what you can do, though, is hide pay rates. So you can see here in our test database here, I have rights to see pay rates. If they do not have the right to see pay rates and they have the rights to see final profit, they can see this screen without seeing too much information. Got a couple questions coming in. Yeah, Keith, go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. While you're working on unmuting yourself, another question came in asking about if when you mark the order as complete, does it change the status? It does not. That would be our next thing that we're going to talk about. So all that's doing is basically triggering the order to be marked as complete, which is in several reports and analysis. You can run analysis and reports on completed orders to give you different reporting. So that is going to trigger several reports, but the big one that it does trigger is the final profit report based off of orders completed from the reports tab. So profit report orders completed. So once you mark that order as complete, if the project itself is absolutely 100% complete, there's no punch list on it or anything like that, at that point you can mark the whole project as complete by going actions complete this project. So there are technically a few different ways to mark things as complete, and obviously you guys know about different statuses and whatnot. Project statuses and order statuses can be triggered automatically, but they're based off of action items. So if you wanted the status to change, on, let's say, customer invoice action item to, order complete, you could do that. Or if the person who's recording the payments, if they wanted to manually flip the status, they could at that point change the status to complete. But I like, there's one other action item that typically comes after customer payment, which is commissions. If you're not using an action item for that, then again, you'd have to manually change your statuses. But I typically mark the project status as complete once the final action item has been done and applied on the project, which is typically commissions, if you do pay commissions. But the actions complete this project, you can usually do that after commissions is what our suggestion is as well, because that's when the project is 100% complete. All costs have gone out, all receivables have been applied and we've actually paid our salespeople on this particular job, that's when I would complete this project. And all that really does is, again, triggers certain reports. You can run reports on completed projects, but you do get a pop-up notification each time you open up that project that says this project is complete. It's a good notification for anyone who's trying to go back in and add something to that project. You know, at that point, I would want some type of, you know, confirmation. Can I add to this project, or do I need to start a new one? So it's more of a red flag. We are looking into possibly more lockdowns in the system at some point. So if you did complete the project, I personally feel like you shouldn't be able to add anything onto it. It should be kind of like locked down, unless, you know, you have someone who could unlock it for you. We always want to be able to do that, but we are looking into doing some more lockdowns, if you will, on projects. That is really all I have for you guys. I got done a lot faster than I thought. So please chime in your questions. Keith, please unmute yourself, or I can maybe try to unmute you. Maybe you're having some problems there. Where are you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are, Keith.
Okay. All right. Louise has a question about the deposit invoicing.
In TA, we have to pay sales tax from the moment of sale. So if I send over a deposit invoice for only 50%, it's going to show that we have a sale for 100%. And then we would have to pay the sales tax on it. Adriana does not want to do that.
No, there's no sales tax on deposit invoices.
No, there has to be. No, see, that's where we get messed up. We have to.
So if you have to, the way that you would handle it is new invoice, and then you would do a 50% deposit invoice and push that over. So that's where we do it now. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Then you're good. Yeah. You definitely would have to handle it that way. The only time that you would be using this is if you did not want any tax. You're not recognizing that revenue yet.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Other questions, please feel free to chat them in or unmute yourself. All right. If you do have any questions that pop up after the webinar, please feel free to email me directly as usual. Thank you all for coming, and we'll meet again in a couple weeks to wrap this thing up. Next session will be in 2 weeks on the same day, and we'll be going over document management. So that'll be a pretty quick one. Just want to make sure everyone's clear on how to add documents into eManage, when they should be adding documents, and best way to do that, quickest way, most efficient. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Appreciate you guys and hope you have a wonderful day.